Hey everybody, how we all doing today? I'm doing good. I just thought I would start off this video in a much more chill kind of capacity. I do want to have a rather bombastic intro, but, the new chapter is out, so I wanted to give some time for spoilers. We are going to be discussing a lot of stuff in chapter 1100 today, the big 1100. So I'm just here enjoying a nice cup of coffee. It's my mid-afternoon cup of joe. I don't usually drink coffee when I wake up. I wait until about halfway through the afternoon, and I'm like starting to feel a little tired, and I'm like, I could use a little bit of a pick-me-up right about now, and then I make a cup of coffee. All right, we good? You are good? All right, cool. What? Seriously, what? Okay, Oda, seriously now. You're pretty good at this, in the twist at the very end. I thought we were ending Kuma's backstory, which we pretty much are. I mean, there's not much left. I mean, literally not much left. We are almost concurrent with the start of One Piece at this point. But, did anybody see that coming? Did anyone even, I don't even know if I saw a single theory of somebody saying, you know what, this Kuma backstory, it's going to end with Kuma going to the East Blue. He's going to arrive at Fuchsia Village. You just wait to see what's going to happen. And just yeah, I don't see anybody up there. If this was Vegas, that wouldn't even have been on the betting board. You know, you'd have had to go up to the guy and be like, hey, I want a very specific bet on that board. I want the end of Kuma's backstory to have Kuma traveling to Fuchsia Village, Luffy's hometown. Guy at the desk would just be like, all right, 1 in 10,000 odds. Here we go. Put all the money on it. And then it happened. It's like, all right, what? Oh, man. Okay, so, why? Why did Kuma go to the East Blue? Why is he there? I would assume to go see Luffy in some capacity. I'm not really sure what the meeting would entail, because Luffy, as he at least is in the story when he first meets Kuma, or rather he first meets the PX4 that looks like Kuma at Sabaody, and then the real Kuma shows up. So either way, Luffy properly meets Kuma at the Sabaody archipelago. Remember, although Kuma did show up during Thriller Bark, Luffy was unconscious that entire time, so he wasn't awake when Kuma arrived there and talked to Zoro and everybody, right? And the nothing happened moment, because nothing happened, right? It's funny, because in the review, I was like, oh, maybe Kuma used his paw powers to, he met Luffy and told him a bunch of stuff, and they had a whole conversation, and then he rejected the memories out of Luffy, and then Kuma left. And it's like, oh, that's the reason why Luffy's never brought this up before. And then a lot of people in the comments were like, I don't know, Tekking, Luffy really does have a shitty memory. And I'm like, yeah, that does kind of track. There have been many moments in the story where Luffy has forgotten a character's face, forgotten a character's name. It is 100% in character for Luffy, it took him this long to realize, they're at Egghead right now, for Luffy, the pieces of the puzzle to finally connect, the Tetris pieces to fall into place in Luffy's head, and it's just like a ding, 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 oh! You're that guy! I remember you! You showed up at Fuchsia right before I left on my journey. We had that whole conversation. Oh, man, how you been? It's been a while. That is in character for Luffy, so let's not put that off yet. Here is, Luffy, why did you never mention this before? I don't know, I forgot. It's okay, yeah, you really can't be mad at that. That is how Luffy is. He's been established to be that up until now. He's nothing if not very forgetful, okay? So anyway, let's go through the timeline. I should back up a bit, all right? So we are getting very, very close to the beginning of the story of One Piece in this flashback, okay? The beginning of the story of One Piece is when Luffy sets out from Fuchsia Village at the very end of Chapter 1. Remember, Chapter 1, Romance Dawn, is mainly the flashback with Luffy and Shanks. And then Luffy leaves Fuchsia at the very end of that chapter. The anime does it a little differently, where they open up episode 1 with Luffy leaving, and then the flashback with Shanks doesn't happen until episode 5. But chapter 1 is that whole flashback with Shanks and Higuma and everybody, and then at the very end, Luffy punches out the Lord of the Coast and he sets sail on his journey. Okay, we are very close to that moment, all right? So, 4 years ago, that is when the Punk Hazard explosion occurred. Vegapunk moved to what is currently Egghead, and then Kuma takes Bonnie over to Egghead to, find a cure for her sapphire scales, and Vegapunk has to do a 6-month-long treatment with the stem cells in order to cure Bonnie. Okay, so that means we're 3.5 years down the timeline a bit, okay? Then, after that, Bonnie has to spend another year in Sorbet, to recover, okay? So Kuma drops her off at Sorbet, and then he leaves to go be a warlord. Now, we see in the last chapter, chapter 1100, we kind of cut around to see Kuma gaining notoriety and infamy in the pirate world, okay? All the other warlords are reading the paper and reacting to him joining their ranks. He's making a name for himself in the world, okay? So we don't know how much time passed from when Kuma dropped off Bonnie at Sorbet and then at the end of the chapter when he's arriving in the East. But we can assume, at least I'm going to assume, it's like maybe another 6 months. So that means it's 3 years before the current story, which means it's 1 year before Luffy leaves Fuchsia. So at this point, we see Luffy is still on the island because we see a panel with Luffy taunting a tiger and running away from him like, oh man, he's mad. And then as Kuma is arriving at Fuchsia Village, okay? So Luffy at this point, if this is around a year before he leaves, Luffy would be 16 years old, okay? And he's just training off in the mountains of Mount Kolbo, in the wilds of the island, punching out tigers and bears and everything. He basically is staying in like a little tree house outside of Dadan's mountain fortress, but he does go down to Fuchsia every once in a while to see Makino and Whoop Slap and everybody, because they are basically his family. He kind of raised him, right? Him and them and Dadan. So anyway, Luffy is there right now, and so as Kuma is approaching the island in his pirate ship that has the amazing Jolly Roger of Bonnie's little artwork of Kuma. I think I have it over here. Yep, it's right here. Just glorious, glorious artwork as Kuma's Jolly Roger. The most feared sigil in all 4 blues in the Grand Line right here, ladies and gentlemen. So he receives a message. Bartholomew Kuma, come in. You have new commands from the government. What is your current location? I'm in the East Blue. What are my orders? Okay, so pause for a moment there. I was a little confused by that because one interpretation of that is that Kuma was given specific orders by the government to go to the East Blue, to go to Fuchsia Village, like that was his mission. However, the way I first interpreted it was like Kuma decided to go to the East Blue on his own volition. Like he's like, I want to go to the East Blue, specifically Fuchsia, for something. And then as he's approaching the East, or approaching Fuchsia, he gets a message, and he's like, hey, Kuma, where are you? You have a new command. He's like, oh, I'm in the East Blue right now. What do you want me to do? So the command might not have anything to do with the East or Fuchsia or Luffy or anything. The new command might be like, oh, you're in the East. Well, we need you in the North, so get your ass over there as fast as possible. You have a new mission. It might be something like that. However, I'm still going along with the lines that the mission does involve the East, okay? So if he's not there to see Luffy, because I did see a few comments that are like, Tekking, just because Kuma's going to Luffy's hometown doesn't mean he's there to see Luffy. I mean, I find that kind of silly because Oda specifically drew Luffy like he's right there in the last panel. Like, Luffy's there, he's the main character, Kuma's arriving, but he's not going to see him. He has no business involved with Luffy whatsoever. Like, all right, well, why else would he be at a small little village in the middle of nowhere, really? It's on the outskirts of the Goa Kingdom. He's not even going to Goa proper. He's like not like going into the actual main city. He's on a outskirts suburb of Goa. So why could he be there? Who else is at Fuchsia for Kuma to see, all right? Well, we got Makino, we got Whoop Slap, we got that fisherman guy. Maybe Kuma just heard that Makino's like Party's Bar has some really good ale, and he's like, man, I want some of that ale. I hear it's the best in the East. This tiny little pub in the middle of nowhere. I want to get some of that beer, whatever. I doubt that. Some people brought up Shanks. Some people are like, well, wait a minute. Is Shanks there at this time? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, Kuma would be around 8 or 9 years late to see Shanks, because Shanks left Fuchsia when Luffy was around 7, or rather, Luffy ate the devil fruit, the Gummo Gummo no Mi, when he was 7. Shanks left a little bit after that, so maybe he was 8 when Shanks left. But either way, Luffy is like 16 now, so it's either 8 or 9 years ago that Shanks left Fuchsia to go and be a pirate. Luffy is by himself himself, essentially. I mean, he has Dadan and everything, but Ace is gone, Sabo, the whole thing with the Gray Terminal, that happened years ago. And Shanks is already firmly established as a Yonko in the New World at this point. If this is around a year before the start of the story, yeah, Shanks is already a Yonko. He's in the New World. He has a bunch of land and territory. He's one of the biggest badasses in the entire, One Piece world. Okay, so Shanks would not be here. So unless Kuma is going on some really, really outdated data, like we hear that red-haired Shanks is in the East at Fuchsia, it's like, all right, that was almost a decade ago at this point. So I don't think he's there to see Shanks. I don't know if this would make a lot of sense, but Garp. I was thinking Garp, because Garp does stop by every once in a while to make sure Luffy's doing okay, and to see Dadan and, everybody at Fuchsia every once in a while, because Garp grew up there too. So it's like, okay, maybe Garp, but I don't think Garp is here at this point. And also, warlords, they're not actually members of the Marines, but they are members of the world government. Like, if Kuma wanted to meet Garp for some reason, I feel like he has the connections to make that work. He's a warlord of the sea for the government. Garp is a vice admiral. If for whatever reason he wanted to see Garp, I don't think he would have to go to Fuchsia to see him. You know what I mean? So I don't think he's there to see Garp, but that is another character that would be present. Dadan and the mountain bandits, like, why would he be there for that? Like, maybe it's like, oh, we need these mountain bandits at Mount Kolbo at some random place in the middle of the East. They're causing some trouble. Kuma, go and teach him a lesson. Your mission is to eliminate Curly Dadan. I don't feel like they would bust out a warlord power to eliminate a small-time mountain bandit crew. Not saying anything bad about Dadan. As far as mountain bandits go, she's one of the toughest of the tough. I'm just saying, it's a little bit of overkill. As Mihawk would say, I don't fight rabbits with a cannon. That's Kuma's the cannon in this particular instance, right? Okay, so if you disregard all those other characters, Luffy's the only one that makes sense. Also, the fact, and I missed this in the review, I really should have seen this, Luffy has the powers of the sun god fruit. Kuma is literally the biggest worshiper of Nika, like, on the entire planet, all right? Literally, dude, it was a pastor in a church that had a cross with a sun sigil right in the center of it and carries around preaching the gospel of sun god Nika. So yes, I think Luffy and Kuma are 100% going to meet here. Now, whether or not Luffy just forgot, because it might have only been like a few hours. Kuma shows up, sees Luffy, chats with him for like an hour, and then he was like, I must leave now. I have another mission. And then Luffy's like, oh, okay, see ya. And then he goes away to train, and then Luffy, by the next day, just completely forgets about Kuma. And, and by the time, like, a year later, when he finally sets sail, he's not going to remember him instantly. He's just being like, oh, that guy, yeah, he showed up at Fuchsia, like, a year before I left. We chatted for, like, an hour. I completely forgot about him, honestly. You think seeing him at Sabaody would have jogged Luffy's memory, but he's Luffy. What are you going to do, right? Okay, absolutely. Or any other point in the story. So, at any rate, is Kuma's mission something involving Luffy? Because we have the Hito Hito no Mi, model sun god Nika, or the Gamu Gamu no Mi, as the government likes to call it. So the last place that the government knew this fruit was in the East, when Who's Who, back when he was the commander of Cypher Pole 9, was ordered to go and retrieve it. He did. He had it on his ship, and he was heading back to Marijois, purportedly, when the red-haired pirates, led by Shanks, attacked his crew, wiped it out, and stole this fruit. Now, after that, I don't think the government knows exactly where it went. And they even mention that this particular fruit has always evaded them, all right? So maybe after, several years went by, because Luffy has had the fruit now for like 8 or 9 years, several years go by, but eventually they dig up some information. It's like, all right, we know that red-haired Shanks had this devil fruit in his possession. Now, the red-haired crew are Yonko in the New World, but none of the crew have the power of the sun god fruit. So that tells the government Shanks didn't eat that fruit, Lucky Roo didn't, Ben Beckman didn't, Yasop didn't. None of the top officers of the red-haired crew have the power of this devil fruit. None of them are stretchy. None of them are using any of the powers of the Gamu Gamu no Mi. So it's like, all right, well, if none of the red-haired crew have it, what if the fruit never left the East? So maybe they start digging. They send some Cypher Pole agents out. What if they eventually find out red-haired Shanks, the time he was, the time that he captured the Gumu Gumu no Mi, was docking his ship at this small little village way out in the East? Now, also keep in mind here, the Gorosei are not necessarily afraid of every single person that eats the Gumu Gumu no Mi. Joy Boy had it during the Void Century, and Luffy has it now. But there have been, I'm sure, plenty of other wielders of this power. It's just that none of them awakened to the true power of it since Joy Boy and now Luffy. So there's been other wielders of the Gumu Gumu no Mi, sure, but the government has never really been all that worried about them because in 800 plus years, no one has actively used the Sun God powers. They just think it's the rubber fruit and they usually end up dying or something. I believe there was a guy by the name of Long John Magnum that had the power before Luffy, but he didn't really use it all that well, and I think he fell in a volcano or something. So, the government's not going to be worried about those kind of characters, right? So to the government, to the Gorosei, it's just like, oh, somebody has the Gumu Gumu no Mi? Oh, that sucks. We really want to get our hands on that thing, but no one's awakened the power in 5 centuries, 6 centuries, 7 centuries. Eventually, the Gorosei are going to get complacent. Eventually, they're going to be like, dude, it's been 8 centuries since the last person has awakened that power. It's never going to happen again. Joy Boy was the only person to awaken it. No one's ever going to get that power again. Okay, so it's probably not super high priority. Maybe they even knew that somebody ate the devil fruit in Fuchsia. Maybe they knew Shanks went to Fuchsia Village and they sent a spy in at some point. I mean, it honestly would not have been difficult to send somebody. They probably didn't even send Cypher Pole 9 or Cypher Pole 8. I don't know, Cypher Pole 3 maybe? Yeah, okay. Hey, Cypher Pole 3, Agent, Agent John... John Water Bottle. John Water Bottle. We have a mission for you. It's a mission that Cypher Pole 3. It's your particular set of skills is great for. It's like, okay, what is it? Well, we need you to go to Fuchsia Village. Word has it that red-haired Shanks brought the devil fruit, the Gumu Gumu no Mi there. We just want confirmation about what happened to it. So John Water Bottle, he disguises himself as just a fisherman or just a traveler or somebody. Fuchsia Village is a fishing village, so I'm imagining people arrive all the time and they fish and whatever. So he shows up there as just a traveling fisherman, and he walks around town and he's asking around at Party's bar or whatever, and it probably wouldn't take him very long to see Luffy. Luffy is a little kid at this point, using his Gumu Gumu no Mi powers, and, Jack Water Bottle, John Water Bottle, he's just like, oh yeah, that was the kid right there. Okay. Yeah. All right. And so that was his mission. His mission was just to find out, not to do anything about it. The mission, not to kill Luffy or something. The mission was just to find out who has the power. Does anybody have it? Okay. So he goes back to the Gorosei. He reports, and he's like, yeah, there's a little kid named Luffy that lives at Fuchsia Village that has the power to the Gumu Gumu no Mi. And the Gorosei are probably just at the time when Luffy was a little kid, we're probably just like, oh, okay. Just a little kid has it? All right, he's not going to do anything with it. And at this point, Luffy was not really skilled with the power, right? So maybe they just didn't care. Maybe they were like, all right, well, eventually that kid will die, and then the power will be reincarnated in a fruit, and I guess we'll try it again. So maybe the government knew Luffy was there, but they didn't really care enough to go and get it, or rather, simply killing Luffy is not going to give them the Gumu Gumu no Mi. If Luffy dies, all that probably means is the fruit reincarnates somewhere else in the world, and it's back to basics. It's back to trying to find the thing all over again, okay? So killing Luffy would accomplish nothing. I mean, I guess it would speed up the process, but also maybe the government, maybe the Gorosei are like, well, as long as we know where it is, it's in the hands of this stupid kid from the East. He's not going to do anything with it. He's not going to become somebody notable. At least we know it's in the hands of somebody that is not going to awaken the power. They never anticipated for Luffy to actually awaken the power. They didn't actually anticipate that because it hasn't happened in 800 years. They got complacent, all right? There was a bad move on the Gorosei's part, but they're like, don't worry about it. Maybe something like that. So Kuma might have found out about this, and he knows Luffy's in the East, so he wants to go there to see him, okay? Now, does Kuma know that Luffy is Dragon's son? I think in the present storyline he does. I don't know if at this point he would. Maybe he does. Kuma and Dragon were really close friends, but so were Ivankov and Dragon. And Ivankov never actually knew. Dragon never opened up about his family to Ivankov. And Ivankov is like his closest confidant. Like the origins of the Revolutionary Army are in Dragon and Ivankov, and then Kuma was recruited at Sorbet. Dragon knew Ivankov long before Dragon knew Kuma. So in that situation, if Ivankov didn't know about Dragon's child, then I don't think Kuma would have either, right? But it might be a thing where if Kuma sees Luffy, he might instantly recognize, like, oh, you're Dragon's son, I know. He might have not told Luffy about it, like, Luffy, I believe your father... Wait, what's your name? Monkey D. Luffy. Oh, I guess that would have told him right away. If Luffy said to Kuma, my name is Monkey D. Luffy, and Kuma knows Monkey D. Dragon, and he's looking right at Luffy. He looks just like Dragon. Not just like Dragon, but there's similarities. It'd be like, oh, you're Dragon's son. Maybe Kuma doesn't tell that to Luffy, because Luffy doesn't really find out that Dragon is his father until later at, post Enies Lobby when Garp tells him, right? So maybe Kuma doesn't say anything to Luffy here, but maybe he figures it out. Maybe Kuma figures it out. Maybe this is where he learns it. Like, oh, Monkey D. Luffy, Monkey D. Dragon, you look similar. Okay, the age is, yeah, I guess that would have been the time that Dragon could have had a kid. Yeah, okay. I guess that's all right. So a lot of people, because Kuma is a devout follower of Nika, want him to meet Luffy. Well, the thing is, right now Kuma is a emotionless and, memoryless cyborg. He's PX0. He doesn't have any humanity anymore, all right? That's all been removed from him over years of, procedures. So doing this as a bit of a prequel, even if it's not in like a major way, it's not like, Kuma's going to show up and have this really thought-provoking conversation with Luffy. All right, it's Luffy. Come on now. If anything, Luffy will be like, oh, hey, large bear dude, you want some meat? I just killed this tiger. He was really pissed off at me earlier. Have a piece. And Kuma's like, oh, this is the sun god I've been worshiping my entire life. You know what? Honestly, Kuma might have become happy. You know how Luffy does the dance at Skypiea? What if he learned the dance from Kuma here? What if Luffy kills this tiger, he's chilling out at a campfire in the woods at Mount Kolbo, Kuma walks through the woods and is like, oh, I finally found you, sun god. And Luffy's like, huh? What do you mean? I'm Luffy. Hi, nice to meet you. You want some tiger? He's like, okay. And then they're just hanging out at the campfire and they end up partying and they end up doing the dance. And then in the next morning, Kuma just leaves, and Luffy kind of forgets about him. Like, that guy was fun. Oh, well, back to training. A year later, he leaves, forgets about him, and then maybe now Luffy, his memory might jog to the point where he remembers finally. Or I guess Kuma could have rejected Luffy's memory with his paw powers if you really want to just go adamant with that. But I like the idea now more that Luffy just forgot because he's Luffy. Like the main character just completely forgot about this chance encounter. You know what I mean? Like that's funny. But other than that, I don't know if Kuma wanted to really tell Luffy anything, like any vital information. It might have just been a thing where Kuma learned about the Gamu Gamu no Mi being the Hito Hito no Mi model sun god. And he's like, the same sun god that my dad worshipped and that I have been worshiping my entire life. I would like to meet the user of this fruit, okay? Before I become this, completely removed, hollowed out cyborg of myself, I want to go see... I want to go meet God. I want to go meet the God I've been worshiping. If there's like an avatar on this earth of my God, I want to go meet him, right? And so he goes to meet Luffy, and he doesn't really tell Luffy anything about, like, the sun god itself. He might just be like, this kid, Luffy, is happy and cheery, and he's fun, and it's like that. Like, yes, if there's anybody that should have the power of the sun god fruit, it is Luffy. And then they are sitting around the campfire, and they're doing the dance, and Kuma teaches him the dance, and then that could be just it. And then Kuma is like, that was fun. I'm glad I got to meet Luffy, And then eventually he does meet him later, at Thriller Bark when he's unconscious and then rejects all of the pain, and then eventually meets him later at Sabaody under less happy circumstances when he's like popping everybody away and sending them off. And Luffy, by the way, I want to do a whole video on that scene. I went back and rewatched that last night. The moment where all the Straw Hats are scattered by Kuma. That is such a powerful episode. Like that moment when Nami is sent, and then that last moment when Robin's the only one left and she's just reaching out to Luffy. Like, oh my god, the fact that Oda kept Robin as the last one to go before she gets popped away, and then it's just Luffy by himself there. I want to do a whole video, like a breakdown of that entire scene, because that is such a powerful scene in One Piece. Right, it showed up before on like my top 10 like One Piece moments and stuff like that, but like I got to do like a whole dedicated video to that. I really do. The day of tragedy or separation or something. I don't know. I'll figure out a name for the title. What's a cool name for the video? I'll chat GPT it or something. I don't know. But anyway, Luffy and Kuma, I believe, definitely met, and they're probably going to see that next chapter, and then that pretty much leads into the beginning of One Piece. You know what I mean? So yeah, you could also, because there's lots of scenes, it's the key in the scenes that we haven't seen. Does that make sense? Like, post-war, when we see the flashback with Luffy and Sabo and Ace. Okay, so Sabo dies, and then eventually we have a time skip to when Luffy is 14 and Ace is 17, and he leaves, and it's just Luffy. And Luffy's like, okay, you know, Sabo went out to sea first, and then Ace went. So now I have 3 years to train. So Luffy goes back to training. Then it cuts to 3 years later when Luffy's 17 and he's just like, okay, Dadan, bye everybody. I hate mountain bandits, but you guys were cool, I guess. And Dadan's like, oh, just get out of here. And then Luffy goes out to sea, punches out the Lord of the Coast and leaves. What if there's a moment, I don't know, after Luffy punches out the Lord of the Coast and he's sailing away and he's like, I think 10 crewmates will be the best for me. He's sailing away. And then he starts doing the dance. He's like, ha ha, ha ha. And then that's how Luffy went through his journey. We just never saw it before. It just adds a little bit to the backstory. Here we are 25, 26 years later. Oda's still sprinkling new stuff to Luffy's backstory we never saw before. And there's 3 years there from between when Luffy was 14 to 17 that we didn't really know what he was doing. He was training, obviously, but beyond that, we didn't know. So you could have a moment where he meets Kuma. Why not, right? Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. I'm going to drink the rest of my coffee now. Have a good one. Signing out.